به أو ذنوبه لا يعير بسالف أمره. The servant who is sinful, when he repents from his sin or his sins, he is not to be rebuked or criticized for his prior, the affair that he was upon before his repentance. Right? He's not to be rebuked for whatever sins he committed before his tawbah. Again, this is an issue in which the Mu'tazila, the Shaykh says, خلافا للمعتزلة فإن عندهم ومن عقائدهم الفاسدة تعيير المرء بذنبه الذي تاب منه. From the ways of the Mu'tazila is to rebuke a man for sins which he did before and which he's repented from. Right? Now again, why would the Mu'tazila, why do they say that a person is to be rebuked and criticized even for the sins that he committed and that he made tawbah from? Again, this goes back to the fact that they deny al-qadar. They reject al-qadar. Right? Because you reject al-qadar, if you deny al-qadar, this goes to the hadith of the debate between Adam alayhi salam and Musa alayhi salam. And there's a discussion, I don't want to go into it here, but there's a discussion around that hadith to do with, okay, what was the argument of Adam alayhi salam against Musa? And, putting the blame for what thing was it? Was it for the calamity or was it for the sin? Right? So there's a whole discussion. I refer you to that discussion from the speech of the scholars. I discussed it in the lessons on At-Tadmuriyah a few lessons back. You can refer back to that. But because the Mu'tazila, they deny the fact that Allah decrees the actions of the servants, which includes the sins. Right? So Allah decrees a sin upon you. Allah decreed it for you. They don't believe that. They don't believe that. Because they believe a servant completely outside of Allah's will and His power, he is doing his own actions from his own power. Allah has no role in that when he does that action, when he commits a sin. So therefore, they absolutely would put a blame on a person, even if he's repented from the sin. He's saying you're still blameworthy because you committed a sin, you fell into a sin, because ultimately you are creating your own actions, and this is their way of thinking. Whereas we believe as Ahlul Sunnah that Allah Azza wa Jal, He decrees all good and all evil. Right? Even our evil deeds, Allah decreed them to happen, and there are wisdoms behind them. In fact, we will look at some of the wisdoms behind sin, the commission of sin. But Allah decrees these actions, and sometimes that sin can be a means to becoming a better person, for example. Right? And so, if a person has committed a sin and then has repented from the sin, then we cannot blame that person for the thing that he did before, because now we can use al-qadr as an argument, right? We can use al-qadr as an argument. We can say, I committed a sin, it was decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I repented from it, right? In the past, we can use al-qadr as an argument. But in the present and the future, we cannot use al-qadr as an argument. You understand? Like I can't say now, okay, I'm drinking alcohol, this is decreed by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and what am I supposed to do? No, this is the wrong argument, right? But if something happened in the past, a person was drinking alcohol, he made tawbah, he left it, he abandoned it, and someone comes along and says, oh, why did you drink alcohol? So, well, that was before, when I was sinful, I repented from that now. How can you blame me now? Allah decreed that upon me, right? in the past it is permissible to use al-qadr as an argument from sins from which we have repented from, but not in the present and the future. Right? And why do the Mu'tazila say that? You understand, it's because they don't believe in al-qadr to begin with. So if you don't believe in al-qadr to begin with, then ultimately a man is unable to invoke al-qadr, to console himself and to, for calamities that have gone in the past or sins he did in the past, which he's repented from, right? And that shows the harm that can arise when we have these mistakes, these kind of subtle mistakes in aqeedah, in creed. They impact so many other things, and it leads to behaviors which are unlawful. Now this leads me nicely to a point where we see some of these evil, misguided, hate-filled people who hate people of the Sunnah. And for example, one of them is a man by the name of Daniel Haqiqat Jew. He's an online personality, and he mocks the people of the Sunnah. He says these are former drug addicts, former convicts, former prison converts, former this, former that. He's trying to mock Salafi communities or individual Salafis because of something from their past. They may have been involved in drugs, they may have been involved in crime, they may have been involved in such and such, or even communities. For example, there are communities in different places in America, in Philadelphia, Germantown, in other places, where many converts, they come from a background of, again, the environment. There's crime, there's drugs, there's violence, there's murder, there's there's rape, there's all sorts of crimes in the society, because that's how the society is. And they come out of that, make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, guides them to Islam, and they become better servants. Now for you to raise their past and to mock them and to make fun of them and to revile them and to castigate them and to cast doubt about and to basically demean them, to look down upon them, this is from the greatest of sins. And it is arrogance and it is oppression. And I fear that people who behave like this, that there will be that there will be just recompense for them in this world before the hereafter. Some humiliation. We fear for the likes of these people who behave in this arrogant, demeaning way towards the people of Iman, mocking people who left a life of crime and drugs and disobedience to Allah, right? And they've entered into Tawheed and they worship Allah, and they and even if they did have some baggage from the past, let's say, even then you can't make this ta'yir on account of their previous sins. There's a hadith which is not authentic, reported by Tirmidhi and others. Man ayyara akhahu bidhanbin lam yamut hatta ya'malahu. It's not an authentic hadith. Some scholars say it's da'if, some say it's mawdu', which means that whoever blamed or rebuked his brother on account of a sin, he will not die until he himself commits it. The hadith is not authentic, right? So we're not accepting the authenticity of the hadith. However, there are scholars who've commented upon the general some elements of truth that are related to this issue. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah has some good speech, and I'll translate the passage. It's from Al-Madarij al-Salikin, in the first volume, page 177, 178, and he has some nice speech on this topic. And again, it connects to this issue of sin and al-qadar, and sins you've done in the past and which you have repented from. And Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah, he says that what may be intended in this hadith, even though it's not authentic, right, is that when you rebuke your brother on account of a sin, And Ibn al-Qayyim is not talking about even a sin that you repented from. He's speaking just about a sin, right? So keep that in mind. But we are speaking in the context of sins that people have repented from. When you rebuke your brother on account of a sin, this is هذا أعظم إثما. This is a greater sin than his sin. And it is a greater disobedience, because what this comprises of, somehow you are trying to somehow kind of indirectly point out your own obedience, give tazkiyah to your own self, to be grateful, like to somehow, raise yourself and to try and make it look as if you are free of any type of sin. There's nothing you can be criticized for now or in your past for any sin. Like you're trying to raise yourself, and that your brother, somehow you're trying to throw that sin upon him. Just like someone says, you are a kafir, right? Whoever accuses his brother of being a kafir, it will fall upon one of them, right? And so, and Ibn al-Qayyim says that maybe the fact that if he committed that sin, or in this case, a history, a prior life of sin, disobedience, murder, drugs, alcohol, whatever it might be, that previous sin, maybe it has brought about in him of such humility and khudu', lowering himself and considering himself to be really lowly, and to have cured his heart from the disease of kibr, arrogance, and amazement with oneself, and made him to stand in front of his Lord with his head bowed down, humble in awe, his heart broken. Maybe this is more beneficial for him than you being somehow, trying to portray as if your obedience and your, as if somehow you are better. Do you understand? Right? A person might have a big, long history, just like this man of the 99 men who killed 99 men, right? That made him to inherit such remorse, repentance, fear of Allah, humility, considering oneself to be lowly and lowly in the sight of Allah, which actually cures the kibr from his heart, right? The fact that he has all of this sin. And then he says, how much more closer is this disobedient one, meaning the one who is finding fault with the sin of the sinful person and rebuking him. He's saying, how close is this person, how close is this person to the hatred of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? How close is he to that? And how close is the disobedient one to the mercy of Allah, right? So the one who disobeyed Allah, committed sins, how much more closer is he to the mercy of Allah? And how much closer is this one who somehow, trying to indirectly raise himself and praise himself by mocking and belittling other people for their past and for their sins? How much more close is he to the maqt of Allah, to the hatred of Allah? And he says, a sin that humbles you in front of Allah is more beloved to Allah than an obedience by which you somehow try to point, like you pointing fingers towards yourselves, and you're trying to make something of it, your obedience, right? And likewise, if you spend the night sleeping and then you wake up remorseful, meaning, I slept through the night, maybe I should have prayed, I'm having remorse now, you're remorseful, is better than that you spend the night standing in the prayer and you wake up in the morning amazed with yourself. MashaAllah, look at this tahajjud which I prayed. I prayed long surahs and I stayed awake till this or that. You're amazed with yourself, right? So that you sleep and then wake up remorseful is better than that you pray and wake up amazed with yourself, right? And he says, فَإِنَّ الْمُعْجِبِ لَا يَسْعَدُ لَهُ عَمَلٌ. The one who's amazed with himself, his action will not be raised. And likewise, وَإِنَّكَ أَن تَضْحَكْ وَأَنْتَ مُعْتَرِفٌ خَيْرٌ مِّنْ أَن تَبْكِي وَأَنْتَ مُدِلٌ. That you laugh, like you're joking around, but then you acknowledge your shortcoming, is better for you than that you cry out of the fear of Allah and apparent fear of Allah, whatever, and then you somehow then make something out of this. Look at that, I cried for the sake of Allah. And it's better that you be someone who's just frivolous and joking and laughing, and then you realize, oh, this is wrong. Yeah, I acknowledge this is wrong. This is my shortcoming. Than that you cry and then you think yourself somehow to be pious and fearful and great and somehow No, it's better not to have that. And likewise, وَأَنِينُ الْمُذْنِبِينَ أَحَبُّ إِلَى اللَّهِ. The fact that when you see those who are sinful and they cry and they weep because of that is better than those who are sat there making tasbih and doing all these things and somehow feeling good about themselves, right? And so likewise he continues, Ibn al-Qayyim, he says, maybe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by way of this sin, maybe this sin was an actual medicine, a medicine by which he took out of the servant, out of you, a fatal disease without you realizing. Meaning that maybe Allah decreed upon you certain sins that you committed in the past, or you committed, for which you obviously you are remorseful, and that sin that you committed was actually a medicine that treated you from a disease that you had in you that otherwise would have destroyed you had you not committed those sins and become humble and turned back to Allah and looked at yourself with an eye of derision and belittlement, so you know what your true status is, so then you become a humble servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And so maybe this is the case and you don't even realize this. And he says, indeed, Allah فَلِلَّهِ فِي أَهْلِ تَاعَتِهِ وَمَعْسِيَتِهِ أَسْرَارٌ لَا يَعْلَمُهَا إِلَّا هُ. Indeed, Allah has in respect to His servants certain secrets in respect to how He deals with His servants, which no one knows except Him. And no one can glean upon except the people of basair, the people of insight. So they know from these things, what they derive and they gain knowledge from these things and what is behind these things. And then he goes on, he says, indeed, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, look also at the mercy, look at the wisdom in the Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which is built upon this thing. He says, indeed, he brings the hadith, when one of you, or when the slave girl of one of you commits zina, so when anyone commits zina, then فَلْيَقُمْ عَلِيهَا الْحَدِّ, then let the prescribed punishment be established upon her, وَلَا يُثَرَّبَ, but then she should not be rebuked or blamed, right? So meaning, as you are giving out the prescribed punishment, you give it neutrally. There should be nothing like, you filthy, this. No, it should just be given, and there's no rebuke or no anything, there's nothing like that at all. Right? Because remember, this is actual tawbah for the person. Right? And so here there's no tathrib. Just like Yusuf alayhi salam, he said, to his brothers, لا تثريب عليكم اليوم. Right? There's no rebuke or blame or something upon you on this day. Why? Because فإن الميزان بيد الله. Indeed, the scales of justice, they are in the hand of Allah. والحكم لله. The judgment is to Allah. And even the instrument by which the prescribed punishment is given out, whatever that might be, right? So, for example, the thing that is in the hand of the ruler who whips the alcoholic, or the fornicator who is lashed, whatever it might be, or the one who slanders, whatever, that instrument, that actually, although it's in your hand and you're the one dishing it out, ultimately, as the Sheikhs, as Ibn al-Qayyim says, بِيَدِ مُقَلِّبْ الْقُلُوبِ. Right? It is ultimately in the hand of the turner of the hearts. And so the intent here is simply to establish the hadd. That's all we do. We establish the hadd. There's no ta'yir, there's no tathrib, meaning there's no rebuke or blame or anything like that. And because as he says, no one can escape the turns of al-qadr except the people who are ignorant of Allah. Right? Meaning that this thing that happened to this sinful person who's now being punished, right? These are from the affairs of al-qadr that happen. They happen to people. No one can escape the likes of these affairs. A person can fall into this very, very easily. And so therefore, to rebuke and to blame, this is not for us to do until not even at the moment that we are meting out the prescribed punishments for someone who falls into a major sin. And Ibn al-Qayyim continues and he says that Allah Azza wa Jal, وَقَدْ قَالَ اللَّهُ تَعَالَى لِأَعْلَمِ الْخَلْقِ بِهِ وَأَقْرَبِهِمْ إِلَيْهِ وَسِيلَةً وَلَوْلَا أَنْ ثَبَّتْنَاكَ لَقَدْ كِدْتَ تَرْكَنُ إِلَيْهِمْ شَيْئًا قَلِيلًا. Allah is saying to His Messenger ﷺ that had we not made your heart to be firm, then you would have indeed inclined towards them somewhat, meaning inclined to the people of disbelief, and you might have inclined to them, meaning that it is only Allah Azza wa Jal who gives protection to His Messenger and to the believers, because otherwise we are all inclined towards making mistakes and towards sin and towards whatever it might be. And it is Allah's favor and bounty and His protection by which we are protected. And if He wants to remove it, He can remove it. So we are all prone to these types of things. And so therefore, as we read in these ayat, just like Yusuf alayhi salam, وَإِلَّا تَصْرِفْ عَنِّي كَيْدَهُنَّ أَسْبُ إِلَيْهِنَّ وَأَكُنْ مِنَ الْجَاهِلِينَ. Yusuf alayhi salam, that if you do not turn me away from their intrigue, their plot, the women who plotted, then I would surely have inclined towards them and I would have been from the ignorant people. This is Yusuf alayhi salam acknowledging that he would have been prone to falling into the snares of those women had Allah not turned him away from that. Showing once more that we are all potential, we can fall into that. And likewise from the dua, the Messenger of Allah, Ya Muqallib al-Qulub, he used to make this dua, oh, turn of the hearts, turn our hearts to your obedience or remembrance. And there is no heart, ma min qalbin illa wa huwa bayna isba'in min asabi ar-Rahman. Right? There is no heart except that it is between two of the fingers of ar-Rahman. If He wills, He'll make it upright, and if He wills, He'll misguide it. Right? So it's Allah is the one who guides and who misguides. So this is beautiful speech from Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala. What is the point? What is the point that we are making? As we said here, it is from the way of the Mu'tazila. It is the Mu'tazila who find fault with people who, even after they've repented and made tawbah, that they say you are still blameworthy, you ought to be criticized, you ought to be rebuked, you ought to be, you know. And so this shows really these people or this individual that we are speaking about, they are the most ignorant. They expose their ignorance of these affairs of Aqeedah when they are blinded by the hatred of the people of the Sunnah. And they fall into this dhulm, right? They expose by way of that they are ignorant of what the Messenger of Allah, what he came with and the guidance which he brought. And in this case we can clearly see that this is nothing but the way of the Mu'tazila to do this, right? To blame people, you know, for and even then the Mu'tazila are far better, because they are doing it here because it follows on from their denial of Al-Qadr. Right? That's just their belief, that they are misguided in that. But here, this is like you are just deliberately trying to mock and denigrate a people whom Allah guided to Islam. They abandoned their previous life. Allah brought them guidance, they accepted guidance, and they are trying to be upon istiqamah, praying, fasting, making tawbah, you know, and you are trying to humiliate them and belittle them and mock them and denigrate them, and doing it in front of the whole world. We fear for the likes of this person that this person will be punished by Allah in this life before the next, because of this dhulm, this crime, you know, which is, as Ibn al-Qayyim said, it's an even greater crime than the sins of those who commit sins. That's what Ibn al-Qayyim is talking about. But in this case, it's about people who've actually repented from those sins. From it's in their past, so that makes it even worse, right? So this shows that the Ahlul Bid'ah wa Dalal do not be deceived by their display of wara'. You know, somehow they are pious and they are righteous and they are, you know, concerned for the ummah, and all of this is just a show and a display. If you truly had wara' and you truly had concern for the ummah, you wouldn't be speaking with this filth and this oppression and these lies and this arrogant belittlement of other. You wouldn't be doing that. You wouldn't be doing that. So you have no wara', you have no fear of Allah, you have no humility, you have no piety, right? So these people, they expose everything about themselves, their character, what's in their hearts, their filth, their hatred, their ignorance of the Islamic creed, their ignorance of what the Messenger came with. All of that, they make an open display of that, and they think they are rightly guided. Fools. Upon them is to make tawbah quickly before Allah's retribution overruns them. We ask Allah for afiyah. So anyhow, this is the second issue of creed. And then the Shaykh goes on. Third, the other issue also, ومن عقيدة أهل السنة والجماعة في هذا الباب أن الفاسق الملي إذا لقي الله مصرا على كبيرة